I can tell you this, in Lone Oak on Sunday, we are not in danger of being too full. So if you ever struggle with that issue, send them on down. I'm excited to be here, to have a chance to talk. I was asked on the way in, met a gentleman, and I told him, I think I'm supposed to be speaking. He said, "Are you any good?"
Was that earlier?
Yes, it was. Let me tell you something. By the time we get done tonight, Devin told me, he said, "Pick your favorite sermon." I don't know how you do that. Usually my favorite's the last one I preached. And so, I brought 10. And let you choose. Yeah, I'll just give them all, and then you decide which one you like. I remember when my wife and I have 2 children. We have a son who's 22, and I don't know whose son is at boot camp, but 3 years ago we dropped our son off at a motel in Kansas City, Missouri, under the direction of the Navy, and drove off. Hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Absolutely. But I remember when our kids were little, and Kylie is up here, and she's going to be a sophomore at Harding, and I remember getting so excited when I thought they were coming to the age where they were going to quit asking why. I mean, every word out of their mouth was, why? 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 Did you ever start making stuff up just to get them to be quiet? The problem is, as I've grown, and as my kids have gotten older, what they have learned is Dad has gotten to the point where he just asks why. Why? I think there's something to asking questions. A lot of times we're afraid to do that. We're afraid to ask questions. I don't know if we're afraid we're going to look like we don't know something, or if we're afraid we're going to learn something. We have a real fear about just asking honest questions. Are you any good? That's a valid question, especially if you're going to have to sit there and listen to me, isn't it? There's nothing wrong with a good, honest question. One of the things that I think that I've noticed, I've been doing ministry for a little over 30 years. Okay, now, you'll have to go talk to those people whether I did it good or not, but I've been doing it for over 30 years. One of the things I've noticed, even in my own preaching and things, is as a general rule, we tend to focus on the statements and the commands of Jesus. And I'm all for that, but have you ever stopped to consider how many questions he asked? Have you ever stopped and thought, as you read through Scripture, and just look at it, wow, this guy's asking a lot of questions. We got some friends in Lone Oak, they got twin daughters, okay? They're 7 now. When we moved there, they were like, see, you think my wife looks at me, she goes, I don't know where you're going. I know, but I'll get there. I promise. Yeah, I know where I'm going. When we moved there, they were 4 or 5, and they would come to our house every once in a while, and it was just question after question after question. I thought, how many questions can you ask? But when we come to Scripture, and we don't think of Jesus as asking questions. But what he asks requires thought. It requires some contemplation. You have to think about these things. He doesn't ask questions that you can just throw out a simple yes or no. You got to think about this because he's taking you somewhere. David told God in Psalm 139, he said, "Search me, O God, and know my heart." When Jesus asks these questions, what he's doing in essence, I think, is he's looking at us and asking us to search our own heart. You figure out where you're at. You see where you're at. And so tonight, just for a few minutes, I want to look at some of these questions and kind of, pull a couple things out about them, because I think, if we are ever going to take our relationship with him seriously, if we're ever going to get past just being a go-to-church people and start being church people, we're going to have to deal with these questions. We're just going to have to. The first one, and I'm going to run through a lot of the New Testament. I'll give you my notes if you want them, okay? In Matthew chapter 6, verse 27, Jesus asks, who, by worrying, can add a single hour to his life? Who can do that? Who can, you worry, and you know that what is in the context of it. It's in the context of you got all this stuff, you worry about the clothes, you worry about food, you worry about all this other stuff. And he takes it through this discourse till he gets to verse 33. He says, but seek first the kingdom of God, and all these other things will be taken care of. Side note, do you know how that other stuff is taken care of? See, we don't really consider that. We don't even ask that question. He says, well, it's all going to be taken care of. Have you ever asked how that happens? Read Acts 2. Read the tail end of Acts 2. You see how Matthew chapter 6 works. Read the tail end of Acts chapter 4. You see how this part of Matthew 6 works. You don't have to worry about those because we're being the church. He says, so you seek first the kingdom of God. That's what you need to do because there's nothing else you can control. You're not going to add anything to your life. You're not going to add an extra moment to your life by worrying. You're not going to be able to do that. So here's what you need to do. Seek first the kingdom. That's a big thing. We talk about, preachers talk about that. We talk about that a lot. And everybody goes, yeah. What else are you going to do? What else are you going to do that you can control that's going to last that long? It's a great question. You go to Matthew chapter 8 and verse 26. In that passage, we know that Jesus calms the storm. The question is this: why are you afraid? Again, to the one whose child is at boot camp, why are you afraid? I was afraid. When my son went, I worried. I was afraid. When my daughter came to school, I was afraid. Why are you afraid? We talk in our country today about this influx of immigrants. And I go back to something Randy Harris said years ago. And he said, God got tired of waiting for us to go to the Spanish, so He's sending them to us. Think about that. Why are we so afraid of that? Why are we so afraid? We know in the context of Matthew chapter 8, that they're all on a boat. Jesus goes down below. He goes to sleep. Storm comes up. The disciples get all nervous. They run down there. They wake him up and say, we're going to drown. He says, why are you afraid? What are we afraid of? Are we afraid our churches are going to be too full? Are we afraid? Oh man, the list goes on and on and on. Are we afraid we're actually going to have to be church? There's so many. I can get in trouble here. Okay? I don't want to get in trouble. But I think we need to look at these things. Why are you so afraid? He says in Matthew chapter 11 and verse 7, it's a reference to John. He says, what'd you go out in the desert to see? Here's a question for you. Why are you here tonight? You ever wonder why? And I've watched this. I have no answers, but I'm going to throw it out there because there's some smart people in here. Okay? So y'all can come up with an answer and I'll give you my address and you mail it to me. You ever wonder why on Sunday morning we do it here? And then we just kind of taper on down. What'd you come to see? Get into all these discussions. He's talking about John. He said, you go out and see, a reed swaying in the wind, did you, this, that, or the other. The question is, what did you come here tonight to see? What did you come here to see the show? Did you come here to see if this guy coming in is good? And I'll be honest with you, you talk about those people that are going to come in behind me, and I'm thinking, wow, you talk about dumb lucking into something. You know what I'm saying? Y'all going, yeah, we do. Right? Y'all got to smile more. This being a child of God's a good thing. Okay? He says, what did you come to see? Did you come to see if this guy's any good? Did you come to go, well, yeah, church was okay. Did you come in to see if Devin, Dr. Swindle, whatever you prefer to be called, Dr. Devin Swindle, whether he led the songs you liked or not the songs you liked, or whether he did this that you liked or that you didn't like, what did you come to see? Or did you maybe just come here tonight because you just need a glimpse of the Messiah? Because I promise you, if you look for Him, you'll see Him. But that'll mess you up. That'll change your world. That'll change everything about you. That'll change how you look at raising your kids. It'll change how you feel about the question why. It'll change everything. What did you come here to see? Matthew chapter 14 and verse 31. Story of Peter getting out of the boat. He's only doing what Jesus told him to do. We know the story. And Jesus looks at him and says, why do you doubt? Why do you doubt? I'll be honest with you. I've been nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs for a week. You know why? I don't either. Because I'm not doing anything different here than I do in Lone Oak. And let's talk about Jesus. Why would God work any more mightily through me there than He does here? Why do you doubt? When we consider and when we begin to understand, and there's a lot to that too. I mean, you can't cover this in 30 minutes, but when we begin to understand our calling in Matthew 28, which I still maintain, and you can disagree with me if you want to, and I'm willing to talk to you about that. I still think Matthew 28 is job one of the church. I think that comes before a lot of other stuff. That's our primary job. When we begin to understand our calling, and then we think of all the reasons we can come up with, well, I can't do that. I don't have the degrees that you have. I don't have the experience that you have. I don't have the this that you have, the that you have. And my question is this, and it's a question Jesus asks each of us. Why do you doubt? Why do we assume that He could turn the world upside down with 12 ordinary, unlearned men, but that He can't do it with us? We talk about the condition we find our world, our country in, with all the hate and all the goodness, all the mess. Why can't we change that? I think they're great questions, because I believe the expectation of Jesus is that we're going to go out there and we're going to do what He's called us to do, and through His power we will accomplish what He's called us to accomplish. And His question is, why do you doubt? It's good questions. Matthew chapter 15 and verse 3, Jesus talking to the Pharisees over hand washing. For Pete's sake, hand washing. And He says this, He asks this question, why do you break the command of God for the traditions of man? Why do you break the commands of God for the traditions of man? We don't do that, do we? We don't pursue our preferences, do we? We don't like what we like and not like what we don't like and not worry about the rest of it, do we? See, Jesus is talking to the religious leaders. Not Christians, but they're religious leaders. And so sometimes I think we need to sit back and we need to ask ourselves, am I just doing what He told me to do? Am I just doing what He called me to do? Matthew chapter 20, verse 32, Mark chapter 10, verse 36 and verse 51, and Luke chapter 18 and verse 41, Jesus asked the same question 3 or 4 times. What do you want me to do for you? What do you want me to do for you? See, I sit out there in Lone Oak, and let me just tell you a little bit, okay? Lone Oak is a great place. There's good people, good godly people there. It's a building that seats 350 people. The attendance is 60. 60. And so this question resonates with me. What do you want Him to do? What do you want me to do? What do you want me to do for you? In these texts that I gave you, 3 times it was blind men that asked for their sight. I just want to see. I want to see. The other time it was James and John fussing about getting to be at the left and the right. But He says, what do you want me to do for you? Have you ever asked that question? I'm going back to the couple with the son in boot camp, because, man, would you raise your hand so I could look at they're not even in here. They went, okay, well, y'all can tell them I talked about them. There is connection there that most people don't have. What we share through foster care, there's a connection there that most people don't have. Isn't that really what we want God to do for us? To connect us. To connect us not like we're connected to things in the world. To connect us not like we're connected with sports teams and all this other stuff. Jesus says, what do you want me to do for you? I'm sitting out there in Lone Oak, 60 people. 350-seat auditorium. What do you want me to do? There's been a couple times I've prayed for just a small tornado to hit the building so we could build something more appropriate. I have. But see, that's where it comes into somebody coming up and asking if you're any good. You know what I want? I want to be effective. My son is stationed in 29 Palms, California. Okay? There's church there. There's congregation there. Didn't take care of him. There's 100 reasons. I send my daughter up here to Searcy, and she is covered up with congregations. Covered up. Looking for a home. Now, don't hit her right after this is over, okay? It's not why I said that. Don't do that, please. You know what I want? I want the church to be strong for my kids. I want when my kids go off to California or Florida or somebody's in somewhere in Africa, I want God to take care of them. And I ask Him for that, plain out. I don't hem-haw around and I don't use King James language. I just tell Him, this is what I want. This is what I want you to do. And it's kind of like the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego thing. Even if He doesn't, I don't quit. I'm going to ask Him for what I want. So what do y'all want Him to do? You've got a potential on Sunday. That just boggles my mind. I'm just going to tell you. Anticipating such a crowd that you're asking the regulars, not the unleadeds, but the regulars, to come early so that there'll be plenty of room. Acts chapter 2. It's not all random thoughts. This makes sense in my head. We were talking about, it does. Sad for Lone Oak, isn't it? Talking about the invitation a while ago, right? You know what I want? I want to be preaching one of these days and somebody stop me right in the middle and say, what do I need to do? What do you want me to do for you? John chapter 5 and verse 6. Do you want to get well? Sounds like a stupid question, doesn't it? Now, you can't really say that when Jesus asks a question because He'll strike you, but it sounds like a stupid question, doesn't it? Do you want to get well? Well, of course I want to get well. Of course we want to get well, don't we? Let me tell you about my dad. My dad, going to be 81 in December, 2 years ago, diagnosed with kidney cancer. So they go through all this process. I go up there this last week. Well, there's been a couple times the doctors have tried to do certain things and my dad just refuses. Just grouses at them and just refuses to do it. Ain't it? Okay. Doesn't make sense to me. My dad is 6'4". When we left Missouri 3.5 years ago, he weighed roughly 250, 260 pounds. Okay? Big man, always been a big man. My dad today, he's still 6'4", but he weighs 160 pounds. He can't walk. His thighs are this big around. I'd take him to the bathroom. Say, well, David, we didn't know that. Yeah, you do. Yes, you do. Because there's a lot of people sitting in congregations all over the country who are sick and they don't want to get well. And so we go to the doctor again. The doctor says, I don't know what to tell you. We got this scan here, and the scan says there's no active bone cancer in your body. You got one little spot over here. But you're going to have to do physical therapy. If you don't do physical therapy, you're not going to regain any strength. You're not going to be able to walk anymore. If you don't do that, if you'll do physical therapy, you can regain some of that. You can get some of that independence. So I look at my dad and I said, Dad, there's your options right there, bud. You can do the physical therapy and get better and stay home. Don't do it, go to nursing home. Your choice. It's a man sitting by the pool, been an invalid for 38 years. For 38 years, he's been unable to do anything. Do you know how easy it is to get accustomed to having everybody else do stuff for you? Do you know how easy it is to get used to somebody else doing all the work and you just kind of lay there? And Jesus comes up after 38 years and says to him, do you want to get well? What would your answer to that be? See, I like church where somebody else is always doing it. I like church when 20% does 80% of the work, which we've been spouting for 50 years. And I know that because I've been in church for 55. And I remember hearing it at 5. I don't really remember that. You can't fib when you're preaching, can you? That's a bad thing, right? You're going, I should have never asked him. I know, right? See? Bad choice. Yeah. Earl's going to come up to me and say, no, you're bad. You stink. But we like that. You know why? Because it's easier for me to fuss. I can fuss better if Devin's preaching than I am. I say, man, if he had done this or said that. Song leaders, I know who your song leader is, and I'll tell you, I tried to steal him. I tried hard to steal him. But it's easy if he doesn't pick the song. All that stuff, you know that. You know that. It's not easy to get up and do the work. Because you see, if he heals that man, if he heals him, he's going to have to pick his own mat up. He's going to have to walk his own self home. I watched my dad. Now, I'll just tell you this, a little bit of history here. When I was growing up, my dad, if his tea glass was empty, he sat in his chair, he just rattled the ice. And my mom came and got him more tea. I tried that when I got married. Yeah, no joke. My wife looked at me and said, I don't know who you think you are, but you can get your own tea. Do you want to get well? That's a great question, isn't it? You can't just say yes or no, because there's too much that goes with it. There's too much that is wound up with it. There's too much tied into it. John 20 and verse 15. Jesus to Mary at the tomb on Sunday, he says, who are you looking for? It's another great question. Who are you looking for tonight? Who are you looking for? See, because Jesus has always expected that we were looking for Him. Because when we look for Him, He changes us. Who are you looking for? And I'll close with this one. Probably one of my favorites, if I have those, in John 21. Peter has denied Christ 3 times. And when Jesus gets to them on that morning, and the disciples get to him, he asks that incredible question, do you love me? Do you love me? Let me tell you what I find fascinating about that. I'm not an academician. If y'all hadn't figured that out, I shouldn't have told you. I am not an academic. I am not the son of an academic. It's just not going to happen. Okay? So the phileo, agape, back and forth there, I get it. I understand it. I know it. I just don't want to dabble in it. And I don't want to dwell on it. Because here's the point of the question that Jesus is asking you. Do you love me? Do you love me? He'll go on and say, do you love me more than these? And he says, feed my sheep. Feed my sheep. Can you imagine what it must have been like to have been Peter? After he denied him 3 times and then him and Jesus locked eyes. Can you imagine what that must have felt like? Have you ever, when I was in college, and I actually did graduate college. No, I did. And you got to work with them some. But I remember sitting in a lot of classes where, because I am so tall, I didn't know if y'all noticed I was tall, but I would sit in the back and I would scrunch way down like this because I didn't want to be asked a question. Oh, my knee gave out. And so when Peter locks eyes with Jesus, and there's that recognition of all that he has just done, the hopelessness, the lack of direct, all those things that must be going through his mind, and you go and read through the rest of the narrative. But then he comes to this point, and Jesus just looks at him and says, do you love me? See, I've talked to people. Like I said, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've talked to a lot of people. Oh, I'm not worthy. Oh, I'm not this. Oh, I'm not that. Yeah, I know. And so does he. And you know what his question is? Do you love me? Do you love me? These are just a sampling of the questions that Jesus asks us. They require contemplation and they require reflection. In Mark chapter 8, if you were to get past the miracle of the feeding of the 4,000, then you get to what I think is the crux of the chapter. What you find there in Mark 8 is question after question that we must address if we are ever to have a serious relationship with Jesus Christ. We've got to answer them. Got to answer them. Do you ever feel when you get to the end of it that there's something else you're supposed to say? That there's something else you're supposed to do? That there is something that you have yet to make as clear as it needs to be made? That's how I feel all the time. Because I spend a lot of time not asking questions. I spend a lot of time being afraid that I might not know the answer, or I might not like the answer, or all those other things. But when we get to this point, that we will listen to him ask, and we will seek to answer as sincerely as he has asked them, That's the Greek word. That's it, seriously. So I give you that in all of its randomness, in all of its simplicity. Because what I found Christ is pretty simple. And he wants to ask the questions. And he really wants you to answer. And so I challenge you tonight. I challenge you. Answer the questions. There was a time, and you've probably seen them too, you got gift assessments, personality assessment, all these different things, right? And you have to be very clear with people. You need to answer honestly. Don't give the answer you think you're supposed to give. Be honest, right? I challenge you to be honest. Have the courage to look him in the eye and answer these questions. And then let him lead you wherever he needs to lead you. Thank you.